Separation anxiety. Dogs getting stressed when they're left alone. Hi, my name's Charlie Thorburn. Welcome to More Dog Undogs. This week we're going to just talk about dogs and separation anxiety and how it occurs and what you guys can do to help a dog who's got it. It was a real problem in lockdown. If we sort of reverse back, when was lockdown? Like 4 years ago? Something like that. I should know that because I had a child born in lockdown, so I can try and remember that. I'll always know when it was. The problem was lots of people got the dogs. The world and their wife bought a puppy, mostly at hugely overinflated prices. Hopefully most of you have still got your puppy that you bought in lockdown if you did that, because I certainly know that some of them, quite a lot of them probably have moved on to pastures new, to new homes and rehoming centres and stuff like that. You were at home all the time. You were working from home. You were just at home. The kids were at home all the time. You weren't really allowed anywhere, so you didn't go away. And the dog was just with you 12, 14, 16 hours a day. They were just there. They were there or thereabouts. And then suddenly it was over and a load of people went back to school, a load of people went back to work, and the dog just had to stay at home. And they got upset by it. Why did they get upset by it? Because dogs are creatures of habit, and their normal habit that you'd created was you being at home all the time, and suddenly you weren't at home anymore. And you were away for 4 or 5 hours at a time, maybe more, and your dog got stressed. Now, how does that form? Some dogs would have chewed things. Some dogs would have chewed their bed. Some dogs would have chewed the woodwork in the kitchen. Some dogs would have barked and whined. Some dogs might have made a mess, like gone to the bathroom in the house. You know, a whole load of different things. Just generally them getting wound up and stressed because they weren't with you. So why did this happen? It's because they weren't used to it. How do you get a dog used to it once they're not used to it? You've basically got to do incremental stages. So you've got to put them in the boot room or the sunroom or in their crate or somewhere away from you for short periods of time. Talking of chewing, I've got a young Labrador in the house who's just thinking of gnawing on a little bit of wood over there, so I'm just giving her the evil eye. You put them in their crate or in the boot room, not as a punishment, but in a really like a positive way. So they go in there with their food, or they go in there with a bone that they've not had before, or they go in with a Kong filled with whatever you stuff a Kong with. Generally, ours would be their food, i.e. their breakfast or their supper, or a bone, like a roasted kind of knuckle bone type thing. So you're making that room, that cage, that time away from you, like, oh, I get to go in there, and it's the only time I get to chew a bone. So it's not like they get a bone and they've got their toys and their Kongs all the time, and then you're doing it in a different place. It's kind of, they don't have this, and the only time they have it is when they go into this separate room, this separate area away from you. So we start off doing this for just a few minutes, 5 minutes maybe, depends what they've got. You know, a bone can probably keep them busy for 15, 20 minutes. Their food, depending, Labrador keep them busy for about 5 seconds and it's gone. A Spaniel might take a little bit longer. But you're putting them in there, even with their food, you're putting them in there with a bed. And as you put the food down and you say, go, eat it, whatever, you shut the door and you walk away. So the first thing is they don't see you leaving. It's not like, right, I'm off to work, bye, will you be okay? Are you sure you're okay? Pandering to their kind of, their issues. You're literally like, right, they're busy, I'm gonna sneak off. It's a little bit like, I guess, dropping a kid at school for the first time. You don't want to kind of hang around like a bad smell. They need to kind of get on with it. And the more you hang around and you watch them, the more they sort of see you in the background, and then they're like, don't go, I want you to stay. You kind of need to distract them and leg it. Okay? So it's kind of the same deal. The trick with only doing it for a short period of time is that then you're not allowing them to kind of get into a state of concern. They're eating their food, they're pushing the bowl around the floor, they're licking up the bits they've dropped, they're hanging around and they're like, oh, what's happening next? Have a little wander around, and then, oh, you appear and you let them out. A bone's the same. They're given a bone, they're like, oh, look at this juicy bone, great. And they go in, they lie on their bed and they're like gnawing it and messing around with it. And then they're kind of probably got a bit of bleeding gums and they've really made a real dent in the bone, and then they're a bit like, what are we doing now? It might be a bit longer. They might have a little snooze after their food. They might, every dog's got a different habit. If they've had a walk in the morning and then they're getting fed, they've had a good walk, they get fed, they have a snooze, you might be able to leave them a little bit longer. But the trick is you're leaving them for less time than it takes for them to get stressed. So you're leaving them for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour. You're not leaving them for, right, well, we're going to have to get used to 4 hours, so we're going straight in for 4 hours. You're leaving them for short periods of time so that when you go and let them out, they're not in a stress, they're not barking, they haven't already messed on the floor, they haven't started chewing things. They're ready to come out because they're excited to see you again, but they were quite happy where they were. And then every day you just, like all the other training we do, all the sitting and staying and the healing and the time taken doing things, you just extend that a little bit at a time. Now, obviously, if you do this, 3-4 times a day, that's going to work quicker than if you just do it once a day or once a week. So the more often you do it, little and often, like every other bit of training advice we give you, little and often is the kind of the way to do it. So you're then building them up. You're building up their resilience to you being away, without being away from you. Now you're just through there, but what I would suggest is you put them in here, you shut the door and you go far enough away from them, or you just quietly tap away on your keyboard or whatever. You're not just next door bashing pans, doing the washing up, or talking on the phone to your deaf grandmother and yelling down the phone. You want to be away quiet so that don't eat the microphone. You want to be away and quiet so that the dog's kind of like, oh, I can't hear anybody. I think I'm on my own. So they get used to that feeling, but they're not on their own, and you are ready to go back. Now, say you just extend that over a period of time. So other people get this same problem. I was talking to someone about this yesterday, which is why I'm doing this video. I was talking to him about it. He had an old dog and he got a young dog, and the old dog died, and they're now having a lot of issues with the young dog, and the young dog doesn't have the older dog to keep them company. The other thing is they never went through any of this training of having the dog on its own with the young dog, because they were kind of like, oh, we don't need to because we've got an older dog. But what they really didn't think about was the fact that their young dog at 4 months old, the older dog was 14. They knew that life was coming to the end for the older dog, which is kind of why they got a new dog. But they didn't think, what are we going to do when the older dog dies? They just thought in the moment, oh, it's working, great, move on. They didn't plan ahead. They didn't think, how can we make sure that this dog is used to being on its own so that when the older dog dies, they don't start getting stressed, which is what's happened. And the young dog is now barking and whining and chewing and making a mess and generally being a bit of a pain. They've also got the problem that the young dog is getting to about 12 months old. And that's just at the point where they're, people think, oh, by one, they've grown out of all their troubles. Not always, no. A lot of the time, their troubles are just starting. That's when they really start kind of getting a bit overconfident and messing around. So they've got a combination of, they've not got the old dog as the guide, they've not got the old dog as the comfort blanket, they've not trained the young dog to be in a crate because it was just with the old dog. So they've done all these things, or they haven't done all these things that they should have done. And if they just thought about this and thought, right, we've got a young dog, but we're going to put them on their own because it's good for them and it's good for the old dog to have peace and quiet. We've got a young dog, so we're going to crate train it because that's useful to have that done, even if we don't need to do it. We're going to have the dog sleep in the boot room as standard, rather than just have free reign of the house, because they came down the other morning and the dog has chewed a cushion off the sofa or something. And I was like, well, what the hell is it doing in there? Oh, well, we've got kind of open plan house and that's where it lives. And they've got a boot room, but the dog's not used to being in the boot room. So if they suddenly shut it in the boot room, it's going to get stressed. If they suddenly shut it in a cage, it's going to get stressed. So they've now, at 1 year old, have got to go through all of this. That's a little bit like one of us going from having a really nice life and a lovely house, living in a lovely area or being in a nice school or whatever, and suddenly we go bust. And we've got to sell the blooming lot and move into a grotty little flat in the middle of town somewhere. Oh God, I mean, can you imagine? I'd feel for my neighbours if I ended up in a flat in the middle of Perth. I'd be an awful neighbour and I would hate it and I'd be miserably unhappy because I've had this lovely time living where I live. And it's exactly the same with the dog. They suddenly how you're shutting me in a cage, you're shutting me in the boot room, but I usually sleep on the sofa. What the hell? So my best friend dies and now I'm banished? Like what? Of course they're going to get stressed, of course they're going to get in a pickle, and of course they're going to start playing up. So it's just setting yourself up for what might happen in the future, but doing it in advance. So people say, oh, do you crate train your dogs? Yeah, we crate train all of them. And even a 9-10-year-old dog, if I say bed, they'll go into a crate quite happily because they're just like, oh yeah, this is something I did for quite a period of my life. I do it every so often. I do it randomly. I'll go into a crate because whatever, I don't know, trying to reseal the kitchen floor so that house dogs have to go through into the dog room or into a crate or something. You know, they just it is what it is. Or we go away and we don't want it's just easier for our team to look after the dogs if they're not in the house. They put them through into the boot room and the dog room, and they're suddenly life's changed. They're not on their comfy beds and on the sofa and things. It's a bit tough, but it happens on a regular basis, and it happened a lot more when they were young, so they are very used to it. And then the last thing is, along the same lines, do dogs miss their pal? Do they get upset? Now, some of you watched a video recently of us sadly having to say goodbye to Crunchy, one of our dear old dogs, and her best friend for the last 6-7 years has been Chino. And Chino, some of you have seen him mooching around on the videos. She's on the floor here somewhere. And Chino was depressed for probably 3 weeks after 2-3 weeks after Crunchy died. She was quiet. She wasn't sitting with us. She was sitting away in the laundry room on her own. She was just kind of not herself. She wasn't happy. She wasn't waggy. She wasn't being her usual pushy self. And she basically missed her best pal. They were best pals. They used to play and do the Zoomies together most days. They slept together. They did everything together. They went everywhere together. Really solidly for the last 4 years. They probably, apart from the odd day shooting, they really haven't really been apart. And she definitely got depressed, and it's taken Chino a little bit of time to get over it. And actually it's quite interesting because little Poppy, who's now sitting under my feet, little Poppy came in the house just a few days ago, and I can see that Chino, I actually think Chino's racist. We had a little laugh about this. I actually think Chino's racist because she lives with a Cocker Spaniel all the time and has done again for about 6 years. But she definitely likes Labradors more than she likes Spaniels. I think maybe she finds Spaniels a little bit irritating. So she's got a lot in common with my wife. And as soon as Poppy came in, she was like, oh, look, you're a red Labrador. You're kind of like Crunchy. And she's been snuggling with her, and she was licking her face and just generally being quite mothering to her like she was with Crunchy. So them losing their pal can also create sort of a few issues, which I wouldn't necessarily call it separation anxiety, but I would call it maybe a little bit of depression in exactly the same way it would with us. So some people don't necessarily know this because they maybe only have one dog at a time or whatever, but I've seen this a number of times over the years where we've had 2 dogs, 3 dogs who live in the house for a long period of time, and they've grown up together, and they are definitely best pals. And when one of them dies, there's definitely a period of mourning. Obviously, we have the advantage of we can just go and get another dog and bring them in for company. And I guess, that's something you guys have to think about. That dogs are pack animals. They like company. People always say to me, oh, should I have 2? Purely from the dog's perspective, yes. Absolutely, you should have 2. But get your 2 dogs, get your second dog when your first one behaves. But if you've got a 6 or a 7-year-old and you lose a 12 or 13-year-old, absolutely, time to get another one straight away. Whether it's a 1-year-old trained one or a 2-year-old or a 10-week-old puppy. Doesn't really matter, but keep that process going for your own well-being as well as the dogs. Anyway, remember, you get out what you put in. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.